Hello everyone, my name is Edward and today I'll be talking about school violence. There are currently 50 million students enrolled in preschool to 12th grade, and with more additions every day. With the new additions, there will be an increase in school violence and bullying. To understand how this affects us as a society, one must understand what violence is. The CDC defines violence as anything that causes physical or emotional harm to an individual. Therefore, anything an antagonist says or does that can be potentially harmful to a victim is considered violence. This not only affects the victim himself, but it can also affect a society as a whole. Now, you might be wondering, why even bully anyone? That seems extremely stupid. I'll tell you why. Some believe that violence begins at a very young age, and it often is impressed on the toddlers when they see, say, their parents arguing and fighting and calling each other names that aren't school appropriate. They take this behavior and then they bring it to school, which is a form of violence, verbal violence, which just harms another individual, and it's not good. Subjects with violent tendencies often come from violent environments, such as the example with the kids. Again, they're very impressive. They're very submissive to acts of violence in their house because they're very impressionable, if you will. They take the new learned violence from home to school, and then they use it on, say, their friends. Often a bully suffers his own emotional problems, leading to the exertion of violence onto others. They produce a almost ripple effect, if you will. When one bully bullies another individual, that individual becomes sort of scarred forever. And in turn, that person could develop his or her own violent tendencies, just like the bully before her or him. Another adverse effect that school violence can have on the school's community is that violence, it erodes the community, and nobody wants that. And it is shown that acts of violence intended to harm people, it often also harms the community because of the negative energy. And another note, school violence can reduce the productivity of the community. When the community in a school witnesses a violence, they either ignore it or they join in on it. Both are wrong, because in the end, they're supporting it either way because they either choose to look away or they're joining in on the bullying. This leads to reduced productivity because, first of all, if you ignore the violence around you, you're going to have it linger in the back of your head, most likely, because you might feel a little bit guilty that you did not help the person being bullied. Another thing is that if you support in the bullying, you could potentially just ruin your future, because communities, they don't evolve with violence because that's negative, and communities, they're just better when everything is positive and non-violent. Furthermore, bullying can produce unstable victims, because it's often shown that victims that suffer either neglect or violence from another individual, they they sort of have it in their mind that they're unwanted or that everybody hates them, and then they just do crazy things such as homicide, which can damage the community's sense of security because if we have just a bunch of killers wandering around, that's not beneficial for this society. Now let's talk about the victims and the bullies and where this school violence usually happens and the effects of it. So, first of all, school violence is obviously violence that happens in school, but it does not just happen in school. It happens on the way to school, from school, school-sponsored events, on the way to and from school-sponsored events. School violence can basically happen anywhere as long as it's school-related. Now, the victims, they're the special case because if a victim doesn't take the violence very seriously and just shrugs it off, then they're not going to develop any, long-term effects from the bullying. However, there are those individuals that are just in it so deep that they break down mentally, and then something wrong happens, and they just can't go on anymore. So what they do is they either take it out on themselves or they take it out on the society as a whole. We've already been over that, but it is a very important subject to touch. Another thing, when there is a victim being bullied, you never want to go and say influence them to do something rash, because they're very volatile. They're very sensitive to anything that can push them to do anything rash. Again, also, bullies, you don't want to spur them on, don't want to encourage them. Really, bullies, they're individuals that are very violent. They have, again, some kind of mental illness or not illness, just a mindset that they need to violently assert themselves in order to gain respect. And school violence usually happens when there are large crowds, and so that can sometimes influence a bully to do something for the attention. In review, school violence is an act of violence that is school-related. It includes verbal and nonverbal acts, and it can potentially affect the school population. This can be seen in recent news from the school shootings. Now, more than ever, secondary students, 75% of secondary students fear that their school will have a school shooting. And this is not totally unlikely because it has been some sort of a trend in the media. This has been Edward with School Violence. Have a good day.